My name is Stephen J. Abramson. Today we are interviewing production executive Herbert F. Solow, and we are in Westlake Village, California. Today is May 26th, 2008, and this is for the Archive of American Television. So we really are going to start at the beginning. What was your name at birth?
Birth, Herbert F. Solow.
Okay, and the F stands for?
F for Franklin. There was a theory that I was named after Herbert Hoover, and the next president was Franklin Roosevelt. So after Roosevelt, it should have been someone named Solow, but it never happened. So,
Where were you born?
I was born in Misericordia Hospital on 96th Street in New York City, December 14th, 1930.
Okay. And where did you grow up?
Grew up basically in the Bronx, New York, and probably at the age of probably 4 or 5, I don't remember, moved to Mount Vernon, New York. My early life is very cloudy for me. My mother died when I was either 6 or 7 or 8. I'm not exactly sure because I was never told at the time. She was away in a hospital. She had cancer. At that time, cancer patients were removed to a rest home. So I don't remember her very well at all. And my father was a salesman at the time. And so I, in essence, brought up myself at an early age.
What was your father's name?
My father's name was Morris David Solow.
And your mom's name?
Mom's name was Frances Louise. The name Solow is actually a well-known Russian name, Soloveychek, meaning little nightingale, for one who doesn't sing. And my mother was German. It was, she was an American, but the parentage was German. It was a very strange time. I was later told that German Jews did not associate with Russian Jews. They felt they were beneath them. So I recall once, I believe, meeting my mother's parents, or I met my mother's sister one day. So it was a kind of interesting and awkward life growing up. It was me and my older brother, just the two of us. We were living at the time in Mount Vernon, New York, which is very close to New York City.
What was your brother's name?
Brother's name was Stuart.
Do you think you inherited any traits from your parents?
I don't really know. I was, as I gather, again, I rarely knew my mother. The one great photograph I have of hers is playing a saxophone, which for a woman in the 20s playing the saxophone I thought was fairly rare. She smoked and she died of lung and stomach cancer from the smoking. My father, I don't know no one was in the entertainment business. No one was interested in really writing. I mean, at that time, you didn't write for a living because that isn't a job. Carl Reiner tells a story of when he used to see his father in Brooklyn, and the father used to say, "Well, what are you doing?" And he said, "I'm writing now." And the father would say, "How much you making?" And he would tell his father, and his father would say, "Don't lie to me, because no one makes money writing. That's not a job." So when I was growing up, anything I wanted to do, dealing with doing a play in the basement or so, it was I was odd. I was different. So I hope I did, but to be quite truthful, I just don't know.
What interested you as a kid? Did you have hobbies or interests?
I was interested in theater. I was very interested in sports. I was very interested in. I was interested in all kinds of. Loved insects, to collect insects. I wasn't too big on reading, which is a fault of mine. I love radio. When I was growing up, it was radio. To go to the movies was a little expensive until I was a teenager when I had a job, and then I could afford to spend the 35 cents on a Saturday afternoon to see the two feature-length movies and the documentary and the cartoon and the news and the sports special, which was the entire afternoon, which was great. But in school, when I got into high school, in junior high school, there's always the theater groups. I always gravitated towards the theater groups. In high school, I played baseball for the high school and was in all the theater groups and what have you, and was involved in being president of the high school and all that sort of stuff. That stuff kind of came naturally to me.
What was the name of your high school?
High school then, I believe they've changed it since. In Mount Vernon, it was called A.B. Davis High School.
In Mount Vernon?
Mount Vernon, New York, yes.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a veterinarian, actually. That's what I wanted to be. I was told that when I was a little tiny kid, I was taken to a gypsy fortune teller, and the fortune teller said I should be an architect. And I decided that I really didn't. I love to design things, but I don't have that kind of trait. I wanted to be a veterinarian and take care of birds. That's what I wanted to be. As it turned out, I gravitated more toward theater and sports. And at one time, I was offered a professional contract with the Giants between high school and college. I graduated from high school in January. They had then, graduate different times of the year, and my college did not start until the fall. So I played sort of semi-pro baseball, and they came up to me one day if I wanted to do this, and I said, we talked about it. I said, no, I don't, because I'm going on to college. Because to me, when there was no doubt about when you're in high school, you go to college. There's no choice. I mean, it's like climbing up a ladder. The next rung would be college. So automatically I knew I was going to college, so I turned down anything that would prevent me from going to college, and I went to college.
Where did you go?
I went up to New Hampshire to Dartmouth College, and I was very fortunate to get in there. I was very arrogant, by the way. It was the only college that I applied to on the basis that I'm going to get into it. I mean, I don't care. They say Ivy League school, there's a quota system. I don't care. I'm going to get into it. So I applied there, and I got into it. Yeah.
What did you major in?
Majored in American literature and drama, minored in art history. My father was then an art dealer, and I have a love affair with art, fine art. But it was really American literature and drama there.
When was the first time you saw television?
First time I saw television was when I was in junior high school. Now we're talking about, No, we're talking about high school, about 1946, 47. One of my friend's father owned a furniture store in Manhattan. And he was given this new gadget called a television set. And it had a round screen to it, and black and white, of course. And every once in a while, I would be invited over there because there was a baseball game on television. And I watched it, and I was totally fascinated with it. Because I'd only heard radio. I then went on to college, and I ended up running a radio station, the college radio station. And I never thought of TV at all. Radio was, I was in radio.
What was your first job out of college?
First job out of college was a strange job. I had decided that I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. And there weren't really any postgraduate schools that said, this is what we do. So I was offered a job. At these colleges, the senior class is usually inundated with people from other from companies. And I was offered a job to go to Cincinnati and in the trading program for Procter & Gamble and go to this big company, that big company. And I didn't want to do that. And so I ended up with my Ivy League college degree going into the mailroom of the William Morris Agency in New York City and becoming a mail boy. It's the best postgraduate school anyone could ever attend. I made $29 a week. Starved, really, because I was living in Mount Vernon, commuting into Grand Central Station every day, walking up to the office at 1740 Broadway, which is up in Broadway and 55th Street, and then lunch and what have you. And in the evening, I had to take courses in shorthand and typing, because the next step out of the mailroom was become a secretary. So as a secretary is where you start to learn things and you know how an agent works, an agency works, and basically how the entertainment business works.
Was this typical? I mean, was this is sort of legendary that we hear that a lot of people who became very important in show business started in
the Morris office. I don't know, I'm sure there were others before me, but I know I was one of the early guys doing it. And I found I had an advantage because I was in the mailroom with guys who graduated from high school or never graduated from any school, and I had a nice college education, which you have to forget what you learned, basically, but you can't forget how you learned how to learn. And so it became fairly easy for me because I was fairly bright, to move up. And I had my terrible messenger stories and my this stories, and going to the banks in Brooklyn with the savings accounts for Mr. Morris to get his interest every 3 months. I mean, everything that all the kids had to do. But I moved up and I became a secretary fairly quickly, and then they gave me more responsibility, and I was very fortunate. I ended up selling a series of movies and a limited television series that had been canceled, the Mickey Rooney Show, years ago. And I was very fortunate in being able to find buyers for it, and so they were very happy with my work and such. And they made me more, not a full agent, but more of an agent than I really deserved. So I was doing very well until I decided I don't like to do this.
Did you ever take the step? Were you actually ever promoted to being a full agent? Or
never was. If I was, I don't recall it. But I had some friends at the Morris office and executives, and some people who were very angry that I was leaving. But I left. I left because the man for whom I had been working at the Morris office moved over to NBC. And he called me and said, "You want to come over here and work here?" And I said, "Sure," because that was more what I wanted. That was the making of the television show or the making of the radio program. And so after joined the Morris and graduated in 53, went into the mailroom in 53, left and went to NBC, I believe, in 56.
What kind of talent did you work with at William Morris? Who was there at the time? That you would have.
I will name television series you have never heard in your entire life. There was one of our clients. First of all, they were mostly clients in Europe. The whole idea of representing talent from Europe, I think, in television or motion picture was relatively new for us, for the Morris office. And the guy I was working for, named Robert Senator, Bob's client was a man named Sheldon Reynolds. I don't know if you ever heard of Sheldon Reynolds. Shelley was very instrumental in early American television programs, in that he went to Europe probably in around 1950 and put together some money and produced a television series, one for 3 years, called Foreign Intrigue. And Foreign Intrigue shot the first 2 years in Vienna and the last year in Stockholm. and I became the contact for them. And then Shelley went down. Shelley got the rights to Sherlock Holmes and did a limited series in Paris of Sherlock Holmes. And so I was involved with them. And because of the last year shooting in Sweden, in conjunction with a company called the Svensk Film Industry, which exists today, we suddenly found that we were dealing on behalf of a lot of Swedish composers and Bergman, and a cameraman named Arne Suxdorf. And so suddenly when they came to New York City, I was the one who went to see them because other guys were busy doing the more important stuff. Not that this wasn't important, but it was kind of low level. So I was involved with them, and I was involved with an independent producer at the time named Morris Engel. And Morris Engel had produced a charming movie called The Little Fugitive. This goes back to probably 1954, 55. And I happened to know a guy who owned a small distribution company, and I sold Morris's picture to him. And then Morris went and did a second picture. And I was involved in that kind of world, because at that point, when television started with film, right away the mindset went Hollywood. We were New York. In New York, we had the weekly rehearsal of Milton Berle's show came up. In New York, we had Jackie Gleason at the Park Sheraton Hotel next door. He was rehearsing. We had Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca's show of shows. That's what was done there. That wasn't my beat. I mean, I had nothing to do with them except to deliver messages to them. But because film was always the other guy in Los Angeles. So I was really not involved in the production of anything there, but because I kind of was outspoken, especially when I got to NBC, to the NBC Film Division, they gave me things to do. They gave me, for instance, of selling overseas. NBC had no foreign sales division or record so far as how to sell American film television programs overseas. I started it by writing out postcards and sending it to places I knew or heard about. Do you want to buy this program? Like we sold Hopalong Cassidy. And I became fascinated with it, with the foreign sales of Hopalong Cassidy. They dubbed Hopalong Cassidy and sent it in to me, and I sat down and looked at it. And this is how it starts, Steve. It starts where Hoppy is on his nice white horse, and he's riding up, and this Indian chief comes up in this beautiful horse with the long flowing feathers and looks at Hoppy and goes, "The gates." And I said, "Ha, things are different overseas." And so I became fascinated with that whole thing. And so we sold, we sold all kinds of, whatever NBC owned, we sold overseas. One of the things which was interesting is that no one had set up any way of getting dollars out of countries, because the people would pay us in the local currency. I could not take in local currency, I mean foreign currency. So we finally worked out an arrangement. I think the first time it happened was in Tokyo with NBC News, because NBC News had these offices around the country. They needed local currency, yen. We needed dollars, so we traded through them. So we set up a whole system of how foreign sales works for networks. And whether it exists today, I don't know. But it was the early days when no one knew we didn't know what we were doing. We may have done it right, may have done it wrong, but the fact remains we did it.
Did you take any lessons from being at William Morris that you were able to apply to the rest of your career?
Yeah, I got some lessons that were good and some that were very bad. Some of the bad ones I remember better. Some of the bad ones were at the Mars office. They assigned each agent was assigned like a network. So if someone was assigned NBC, everything being sold by that person was NBC. But if I had an idea of something that I wanted to sell to NBC, I could not do it directly because it was set up whereby the channel was only one person. And I thought that that was not good because it did not allow, other ideas to flow in. That always, if I were to call someone at NBC to inquire and tell them about something that I thought would be good for them, with a client that I had been working with, the guy assigned to NBC would get upset. You're stepping on my territory. And my theory is we are a company, it's our territory. But that became a problem. That's probably one of the reasons why I finally left. What I learned from them is if you're going to make a deal with someone, an arrangement, get it down, talk it out. Everyone understands it. I learned something I'd learned before a little bit also, in that if you're going to make a deal, it has to be good for both parties. You can't say I got a great deal and a guy got a terrible deal, because that isn't a deal, because it's not going to work. I mean, somewhere along the line, there's going to be trouble. And so my theory was, which I guess I learned that at the Mars office, is in any kind of dealing, you have to be fair. And that fairness I've taken through, I guess, my entire career. At times it's been damaging, because I've met a lot of people who don't believe in fairness.
What was your first title at NBC?
Oh, goodness. I was like a program executive. Then I became director of something. I don't know. The NBC Film Division was interesting. It was all under the umbrella of a company called California National Productions, which was owned by NBC. Under that was NBC Merchandising, which was in its infancy, the NBC Opera, and NBC Films, and NBC Foreign Sales, whatever, which I took care of. The title I remember best is the one that took me to the West Coast when NBC transferred me, and they made me program director of the NBC Film Division. Even though I was in New York, I found I was working with a lot of the sales guys. This was film syndication. This is not network sales. This is where you sell regionally, basically, mostly to regional sponsors like beer companies are the big regional sponsors. They were then. There were beer companies all over America.
So are you selling feature films to
no, these weren't feature.
Syndication, or were these in original productions?
These were original half-hour film productions that NBC Films did, and went out to our sales, probably 30 salesmen around the country, to sell regionally. And I was in charge of them on the East Coast for a while, and apparently I was doing a good job because they came to me and said, "You want to go to California?" And I had been to California a few times to check on things that were being done there. And I said, sure. I mean, if that's where this is going to take me, I might as well go now. So that's when NBC in 1960 moved me to California, where I was had an office at MGM, strangely enough, based upon what I did in the future. And I was officially, I believe, program director of the NBC Film Division.
Were your responsibilities the same, or did they change?
Responsibilities were basically, what programs do we do, how much do we spend, can they be sold, and such. I was the creative director, program director for NBC, NBC Films. We did not sell network. We sold just to local stations. We sold foreign, of course. And so some of the shows we did, you've never heard of, I doubt anyone else has. We did a show called The Silent Service about, we had a lot of stock footage from the United States Navy. They have a huge warehouse of film at Anacostia. They used to have it. Whether it's still there or not, I don't know. I'm sure it is. Millions and millions of footage, feet of film. And we did the actual stories of American submarines during World War II. We also did a interesting series called Danger is My Business, which I must tell you was my first direct relationship with the Hollywood motion picture business. Cute story. It was done, the production company was a man named William Morrison. He had a brother named Marion Morrison, known better as John Wayne. And so we made the deal with Bill Morrison to do 39 episodes of Danger is My Business. Documentary, interviews, what have you, with people who have dangerous occupations. Guy who makes fireworks. A guy of fishermen out of Alaska. Well, I mean, the people who go to the far extremes of things. And when we bought it, I had a thought, and I said, part of this deal, I would like Mr. Wayne to do a promotion film for us. And Mr. Wayne was a big star. And so I was out in California at Bill Morrison's office, and his brother was there. And so I met him, looking up, tall. Met him, and I explained what we're doing with the series. And he had his only concern was, he being a motion picture person, how many prints are you going to make? Because if you make too many prints, my brother won't see any money. So I said, no, we won't make too many prints. And he said, you won't make more than 250 prints an episode. I said, no, sir, Mr. Wayne. And we shook hands, and that was the deal. And a week later or so, we're at his pool, and he did a promo for us. I want you all to go and buy this program, and you'll see it. It was really, really nice. And I shook hands with Mr. Wayne, and that was the deal. We didn't sign anything. That was the deal. So it was kind of an offbeat world. It was far, far from mainstream, but it was going along well until I had been out there just a short period of time and got a phone call. Got a phone call from the head of California National Productions, who later became president of NBC. I know you guys have interviewed him, named Herb Schlosser, who became a very dear friend of mine. And Schloss called and said, I have bad news for you. And I said, what is that? He said, the United States government has just decided that NBC and all the networks, the 3 networks, are in antitrust violation, and that you can't make films for your own self, which we were doing. NBC could not have an NBC film division. I said, what does that mean, Schloss? He says, come on home. I said, what home? I'm gone. I left it. I have a family out here. My car is somewhere in transit. The furniture is probably in Indiana at this time. And he said, well, you either come back and work there at something else, or you have to be gone in 4 weeks. I said, okay, then I'm gone in 4 weeks. I'm a gambler in that stuff. I know I'm dumb and at times not to do things like that. My theory has always been you can't win if you don't gamble. I mean, you can play it safe at certain times when your head tells you should, but when you're confronted with something, you have to say what's best, and at the same time, it's a chance. And I said, no, Schloss, I'll stay. So they had promised me a car to use out there and everything else, and in 4 weeks there was no car, and there was no job, and there was nothing.
He's in New York and you're in L.A., right?
He's in New York and I'm in Los Angeles in a motel waiting to get into this house I had committed to rent. No money, of course, and it was interesting. And what happened was nice. One of the guys I had been dealing with on a television program called Flight, was produced by a man named Al Simon, who is a lovely human being, producer who been around for many years. He did Mr. Red, he did Beverly Hillbillies and such. I mean, a good guy, Al Simon. And he was associated with a producer named Marty Ransohoff. And to this day, I don't think Marty knows this story, but knows that I knew what went on, is that Marty happened to mention me to the vice president of daytime at CBS in New York, and I got a phone call because they were looking for someone at CBS in Television City to work to be in charge of daytime programs, network programs, and they asked me if I knew about video. I said, I don't know all about video. Of course I know video, and I didn't know a thing about video. And so I suddenly went over there, and suddenly within like 2 or 3 weeks, I was West Coast program director, daytime programs for CBS Network. And I suddenly found myself doing soap operas, and I was doing The Brighter Day, and I was doing Art Linkletter's House Party, and I was doing The Verdict Is Yours, and Video Village with Monty Hall, and shows no one's ever heard of again. And I learned something fascinating. You always learn out of things. You really do. I learned that what makes a good MC and what makes a bad MC, for instance. Monty was great. Monty was glib. He listened. He listened when contestants spoke to him. He reacted properly. I had a guy on a show who was prepped. He was the MC, and this is what he'd do. Hi there, I'm with Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones, are you married? And Miss Jones said, yes, I have 5 children. Wonderful. Any children? And it was that kind of, I'm going, there are people who seem good, but they're not, because they're good at speaking and not good at listening. So I learned when dealing with, in the live venues, that the guys have to listen. Monty was a great listener, I must say. Really, really good at his job. And I was there for probably about a year when another strange thing happened. The guy who was in charge of network primetime programs at CBS New York, named Oscar Katz, was demoted. CBS had something was going on back there. It was all owned by Mr. Paley at the time. And he was offered the job to go back to his old job, which was vice president of daytime programs. The then vice president of daytime programs was then shipped to California to become the West Coast head of daytime, which was what I was doing. Since I was last man in, I was first man out. So suddenly, because of this shift in personnel, they told me, Larry White, good guy Larry, coming out from New York, was going to be the new guy. So I left. And I made a phone call. And I called my old friend Grant Tinker, because Grant was then in charge of the West Coast, programs on the West Coast for NBC out in Burbank. When I was a program director at NBC Films, I used to go with the salesman, as I mentioned earlier, to pitch shows, and they'd pitch the show and I'd explain what it's about. And we used to go up to an advertising agency, and the guy we spoke to was Grant Tinker. Grant was, I think he represented either a beer company or Ralston Purina or a regional advertiser. And so I called Grant, And I said, is there anything around? He said, you want to be head of daytime for NBC on the West Coast. And I said, oh, I'm experienced. Are you kidding? Sure.
How long were you at CBS?
About a year or so. It was very short, but for no reason. I mean, if I had messed up, I'd say I understood that. But this was this shuffle, which happens quite frequently, apparently. And so within a month or so, I had an office in Burbank, and I was head of daytime there.
Now, at the time you were at CBS, you mentioned among the shows on the air were game shows.
Game shows.
And I remember Video Village was like a big game board on a set, right?
It was Monopoly.
Right, but you walked around and through the whole thing.
Yeah, they gambled, and they take steps, and they got in certain things, and they won prizes.
I remember because I had the board game of that.
Oh, that's Video Village, yes.
Milton Bradley. But what I was going to ask is, were there quiz scandals or an after effect of that whole thing like happened in the 50s that were happening in the early 60s?
We knew about it. I mean, we knew about, $64,000 question was on then. And that's when the scandal happened, and Dotto and Jack Barry and that whole group, really that whole group out of Philadelphia, the sponsored Philadelphia, who had the cash ready every week to be picked up. We were very much aware of that. But we weren't high flyers when it comes to giving out money. When this was early daytime, no one went ahead and just gave out a great deal of money. Though there was money around for it. I'll tell you a cute story. One of the series we did at CBS is called Surprise Package. And Surprise Package was produced by the guys who were involved with a network program called Stop the Music or something, where two contestants would, they listen to part of a song, and when they knew the song, they'd run across the stage and ring a bell. Was that was the
Sounds
program.
like a variation of Name That Tune almost.
Yeah, it was Name That Tune.
Oh, okay.
Name, of course.
Right.
Thank you for reminding me. Name That Tune. And so, they listen to it and run across with his sneakers and he ring the bell. And they told me this story, which I thought was hysterical, that, when you cast a drama or a comedy, you cast it well, hopefully, but it's your call. When you cast contestants, you don't know how they're going to be. Those are your actors out there. I mean, your show rises or falls on the quality, the personality, what have you, of your contestants. And if this was early in the game when there weren't too many contestant screeners around who interviewed and found out backgrounds of people, have you. And so they told a story about Name That Tune. There was a contestant who everyone disliked but kept winning. And they didn't know how to get rid of him. He kept winning. He knew you play one note, he run across. So guess what they did? When he ran across, they raised the bell. So he ran across and he couldn't jump. He couldn't ring the bell. They got rid of him. Right? Now, this was...
I guess that's rigging a little bit.
A little bit.
In a different way.
This was. I heard that. I said, that's hysterical. That's very inventive, right? It's not right, but it's very inventive. But then a different guy working on, this is one of the guys on Surprise Package. You guess what's in the box, that kind of stuff. The other guy on it was a writer named Alan Sherman. There's another whole story, because Alan loved to write parodies on songs. And he used to go to parties a lot, and he'd play the songs, and he'd sing them. If big song was Hello Mudda, Hello Fada, he'd sing the song, right?
Right.
A guy at Lou, I forget Lou's last name, at Warner Brothers Records heard him at a party and said, let's make a record. No, yes, let's make a record. So I was a guest in the audience, and we were down to a studio at Warner's Records, and Alan got up there and he sang his songs. And we waited. And it became a smash. An absolute smash.
My Son the Folk Singer or something?
Oh, yeah.
I remember.
And that was when he got on the phone which he always wanted to do, and he called the Lincoln dealer because he got a call from Warner saying, it's a #1 on the charts in here and there and that, whatever. And so he gets on the phone, and he calls the Lincoln dealer in Beverly Hills and says, do you have a white Lincoln? Yes, I do. Send it up. That was it. He had made it. He out of nowhere. I mean, it's totally unexpected. A little thing he used to do was not his job, but he made it with it.
When you went back to NBC in charge of daytime, what was the state of NBC daytime at that time?
There wasn't anyone there. This is what we did there at NBC daytime. We did the same kind of shows, really. The main interview show was Ralph Edwards' Truth and Consequences. So I worked with them for a while. Later, I was a guest on on one of his programs, and worked with him and some game shows. And I worked again with Monty. I mean, it was their concept. They developed it. I was just there making comment and such. They had an idea for a pilot, and we did the pilot, in which there are 3 big boxes, and it became a smash. I mean, I think it's been on for a long time now.
Let's Make a Deal?
Let's Make a Deal. And I remember the group hired Carol Merrill as the hostess, and as a director, that we needed a director for the pilot. And I remembered on The Verdict is Yours, we had a guy named Joe Behar, so I said, let's hire Joe. To this day, Joe doesn't know that I was the one who got him hired, but if he saw this, he'd know. Because I didn't know that much about it, so I just went on the basis of my prior experience at CBS. And so some of the people that we did on Let's Make a Deal, we used, who were working for years and years, came out originally from CBS.
You mentioned you were a guest on one of Ralph Edwards' programs. What was that program?
I was a guest on This Is Your Life, not as the party, but years later, they surprised Greg Morris, who was one of my actors on Mission Impossible, and I was a guest on to talk about why we hired Greg for the job.
When you were at NBC daytime, was Howdy Doody still on the air, or had that already stopped?
Howdy Doody was still on the air. In fact, before daytime, when I was still back east in my office in Manhattan, one of the actors who did a voice on Howdy Doody was a guy I knew from Mount Vernon, New York. So I know he was still going because he'd come to my office to use my phone to order more penny stocks. He bought penny stocks. I met more weird people. I guess I belong with the group, but it was just fascinating. So his name was Bradley Bulkey. If you remember the old Steve Allen show, there was a guy, an odd-looking guy, tall, with a big Adam's apple. He put a bow tie on his Adam's apple and swallowed it, and it kept going up and down. That's Bradley Bulkey. And he was one of the voices on Howdy Doody, so I know they were still doing Howdy Doody. Also, I did a series with Roger Muir, and Roger was the producer, and I think at times the director of Howdy Doody. So it existed.
What was your philosophy about scheduling daytime at the time you were at NBC then?
I had no say over it, really. And also, it was a different time. At that time, when I was at the Morris office and then NBC New York, if you had programs to sell, you didn't sell them to the networks. You sold them to the advertisers, to the advertising agencies. They then bought time separately, and then they put them together. Years ago, after that, at Desilu, for instance, you dealt never with advertising agencies. You dealt with networks, networks learned that they could package it themselves. They could, on one hand, buy the programs. They owned the time. They'd put it together, and they'd offer it together. But early on, it was different. You went to advertising agencies, and it was incumbent upon them to buy time. That's why most of the early daytime shows and some of the old daytime shows today that are still running are owned by Procter & Gamble.
When the Merv Griffin show first premiered in 1962, were you involved in that launch?
Nothing to do with it.
Okay.
However, when I was at CBS, NBC, when Merv came up with an idea for a game show where instead of giving the question, you give the answer, and you must tell me the question. And I said, what a dumb idea that is. See how right I was? Of course. Yes. No, but...
and we're talking about... Jeopardy.
Jeopardy, of course, yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
What were some of the other game shows that were on at the time that you were involved with?
Oh,
Was this a time period when Match Game?
No, there wasn't any Match Game. It was a time period when the big group was Goods and Todman.
Okay.
Goods and Todman was doing most of the stuff. Monty and Steve Hados had a company called Hados Hall, and that was Let's Make a Deal. There was another group, two good guys, so Monty and Steve, called Merrill Heater and Bob Quigley. Mm-hmm. They were the ones who did Video Village, and after they did the Tic-Tac-Toe with all the actors and
Hollywood Squares?
Yeah, Hollywood Squares. That was their show.
Right. There was a show called You Don't Say. Was that one of the...
That we developed at NBC, You Don't Say. We shot the pilot at, I think, KTTV. We did the first there, just to use their facilities. Interesting thing about the Heater Quigley group is that Merrill Heater's, I think, uncle was Gabriel Heater, the famous commentator from radio. This is Gabriel Heater, the voice of doom. And based on my foreign sales experience at NBC, I was the first one to sell the World Series to Japan. Now, I really didn't know what I was doing. I wrote, and I found that a guy responded, and he became the hero of Japan by the Japanese guy named Akuro Shimizu. And I remember Shimizu wrote to me about how much they liked the World Series, and he became a big hero from it. Well, and Shimizu kept inviting me over. And I wasn't going to go there. I was busy working. So one day, Merrill Heater says he was going to Tokyo with his wife. And I said, I know someone there who will, I'm sure, you call him, and if you have any problems, he'll help you. So Merrill called. When he came back, Merrill told me, he called. Shimizu wined him and dined him, picked up his hotel room, what have you, all because of him. Shimizu was so happy over first one of getting the World Series. And one day I get, someone says, there's someone outside to see you. I forget where I was. I think it was at Desilu then. And a guy comes in playing a saxophone and says, a gift from Mr. Shimizu. They're entertaining me. I've lost track after that. But I didn't realize that was something you stumble into totally. But that was probably the biggest foreign sales of my career at the NBC Film Division.
You mentioned when you were at West Coast daytime programming for NBC that soaps was one of the mainstays of daytime.
Yes.
What were the soaps that were on then?
Oh, I wish I could recall the soaps. I know at CBS we had The Brighter Day. Most of the soaps came out of New York City.
Was Another World on NBC at that time?
Another World was on. Edge of Night was on. Guiding Light was on.
The Doctors, was that?
No, The Doctors wasn't on yet.
Okay.
All those shows were on. Funny story. One of the stars of, I think, Edge of Night was an actor named Joseph Campanella. And I forget if I first met Joe. When I was in the film world in Los Angeles, I met Joe. A lovely, lovely human being, and his wife and the kids. I mean, really, really top flight. And I remember I did a deal with Joe and put Joe under contract when I was at MGM, because I felt he had such a great personality, great warmth and talent. I remember I'm walking with Joe through Culver City, just to go to some place to have lunch, and a woman comes up with an umbrella and starts hitting him for what he did on Edge of Night. And I suddenly realized, these people believe that. Also had a call one day, strange story. One of the episodes of a new soap that we started, and I don't recall the name of it, was at CBS. And the storyline, it was about this military. And the storyline, this particular one, was about this lieutenant, let's say, who was innocent, but was tried and proven, he's in trial, about to be proven guilty. But of course the audience knew that he was innocent. But within the show, no one knew he was innocent, right? I got phone calls from viewers saying, will someone tell him? Will someone tell them that the guy who did it was so-and-so? It became, and they used to call it stories. They used to walk, I loved to watch the stories. And they just loved it. If a program, like a live a sporting event, ran late, or something ran over a soap opera, you knew the phones would start ringing the next morning. Then, I've been out of it for many years, the most loyal, followers of programming were the daytime people. And every once in a while, someone tries to do a spoof of daytime, and you can't, because they won't allow themselves to be spoofed.
And some things don't change. They
don't change at all.
The viewers are still loyal, or still
enormously loyal to it.
How did you come to leave NBC?
I left NBC. I got a phone call one day. I really enjoyed working there with Grant Tinker and a guy named Jerry Stanley, and it was Tinker and Stanley were just great. Mort Werner was in New York. They were good friends, and I really hated to leave, but I got a phone call on behalf of Lucille Ball.
And this was, what, about 1964?
This is about, I think, 63 or 64. Lucy and Desi had divorced. I didn't know Lucy. I didn't know Desi. And Lucy was trying her best to take care of programming, and they had lost all their shows. And they needed someone over there. So I got a call to see if I would be interested in being like the program director or something at Desilu to try to get series going, network series going. Obviously, someone had spoken to him, because there's no reason for them to just out of the blue call me. I said, yes, I would be interested in that. Went and saw Grant, shook hands, called Schloss, Mort Werner, Jerry, and I went over to Desilu, which began a whole different side of my professional life. The first day, it was a Monday, I'm supposed to be there. I drive down to Hollywood, and I can't find the place. But I saw a big studio, and I went closer, and it says Paramount Pictures. And I said, that's not it. Then I realized when you leave Melrose Boulevard and drive up Little Short Irving Boulevard, there's the Paramount Gate. But if you take a left, way at the end of this little road is the entrance to Desilu Studios. And I drive up, and I say, "Hi, I'm Herb Solow. I'm here. I'm working here now." "Oh, yes, Mr. Solow. Miss Ball is waiting to see you on stage 12. And I said, "Oh," and this guy was an elder gentleman, right? And I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "Let me show you." They showed me where I should park, and they walked down the stage to stage 12, and Lucy was there rehearsing, and I was introduced, and we're very happy to hear, "Have you heard, what have you, etc. And just get me shows." That's what she wanted. She wanted shows. I said, "I'll try my best." And I left, "Thank you very much." And the guy says, "Now I'll take you to your office." And I walked me to this building. It was by the park. Lucy had a little bungalow there, and she had her office there, and my office was across the way from hers. And so they take me into the office. I look around and I go, yes, it was filled with all old furniture. I mean, NBC and CBS were modern companies. They had, they may have had glass and formica, but it was, it was fairly modern. And I look around, and this guy who was also an elder gentleman said, "Senator Murphy used to be here." I said, "Oh, friend of Miss Ball's when he was no longer senator. George Murphy, who was a dancer, he was here in 36. And I realized I'm at a different company. And so I looked at the furniture, and I turned it over, and there it says RKO Studios. And I suddenly realized this is RKO Studios, and it hasn't changed. At least the office that I was given.
So Desilu was on the same location where RKO
Desilu had bought
been.
RKO Studios. And I suddenly, this is where I was, historical RKO Studios. Howard Hughes and the whole group of, where RKO comes from. Radio, Keith Orpheum. Radio because General Sarnoff had an ownership position. General Sarnoff, who owned RCA and NBC, made the deal with Marconi on radio. He had an ownership position, so R for RKO was RCA. KO was the Keith Orpheum Circle. It was a circuit, a very big vaudeville circuit. I suddenly saw and realized, I've taken a step into the past. This truly is the Twilight Zone, right? And so I said, listen, maybe we could spend a few dollars and get some furniture in here. And so they were very, very distraught over that. They felt, well, all right, I'm the new guy, they're going to appease me and such. So I started at Desilu. They had lost all their shows. Desilu only had Lucy. Then it was a show called Here's Lucy. Of course, without Desi, it was Here's Lucy. And all with the same staff, the same writers, the same director, the same co-stars, the same, everything. There's a sameness to that world.
Right.
And
there was the Lucy show and Here's Lucy.
It was called, let me figure out. I Love Lucy was over.
Right.
She had a new deal called, I think it was the Lucy Show or Here's Lucy, one or the other.
Right.
Your choice. I don't know. And she worked in the same stage 12. And everything else was gone, just totally gone. Turns out Desi was an enormously talented person. That Desi, the Cuban Babalu guy, what have you, he had tremendous feelings when it comes to a real talent, dealing with talent. The cutters loved him. The camera guys loved him. Everyone liked dealing with Desi. He was creative. He was straightforward. And he was gone. And so they had lost everything, and Desilu was a rental studio. You name the show. Desilu owned 3 studios then. Desilu Culver was the old RKO studio. Desilucoenga, I forget the original name of it, but it's called Desilucoenga. There, Danny Thomas show was done, Mary Tyler Moore show was done, Dick Van Dyke show was done, you name them, they were done. Gorma Pyle worked out of that studio, etc. Then there was Desi Luculver, the old Pathé studio, huge studio, that had the back lot, which was called 40 acres, but was no longer 40 acres because I believe the city of Culver City had moved in and taken some of it for a drainage project or whatever. But it's where David Selznick shot the famous Atlanta scene for Gone with the Wind. It was the studio they used to produce Gone with the Wind.
Okay. Let's continue after we